Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my Metallica Reformatted Discography review. A review that I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting with bated breath for, but I'm happy to finally bring to you. Today, I'm going to be breaking down 12, yes 12, of their releases featuring stuff that people don't normally talk about when lumping their discography together, certain collaborations that they've done, and all that sort of stuff. In one video, ranking them, giving you a roadmap. You know what I'm doing. Old discography reviews in the new format. But before I talk about the records, I'm going to talk about their one EP worth of note right now. Hate is a train. So Beyond Magnetic was an EP that came out in 2011 that was 4 tracks that they recorded during the Death Magnetic sections that just didn't end up on that record proper. And I kind of get why. I like these 4 tracks, and I can see one of them kind of rotating into the track listing. But they're alright. They're more tracks along the same lines of stuff from Death Magnetic. They have more propulsive riff work, like on Hate Train or Just a Bullet Away. And Rebel of Babylon is like this 8-minute epic. You know, it's them doing the same things that they were doing on Death Magnetic, but I understand why these songs may not have been on that record proper. I'll talk about it when I talk about Death Magnetic, but that's a pretty tight release, by the by. And there's really not many songs that I feel like would be warranted swapping with any of these. If you like Death Magnetic and you want to hear more of the ideas that they explored on that record, it's an interesting point of interest, I guess, but it's really best served as a companion piece to that EP. You know, the songs aren't bad, but they're nothing special. And with that out of the way, let's get to ranking. I am the table. It's like if Katy Perry did an album with Bjork. It's like if Chris Thile did a record with Mumford & Sons. It's like if Florida Georgia Line ended up doing a record with Aesop Rock and Sturgill Simpson. This record just feels like it doesn't have an audience, you know, and it feels like it's two worlds that just don't work together, trying their best to make it work. You know, Lou Reed has this weird idea in mind, this weird concept that he's lyrically trying to explore, and Metallica's trying their best to make music that would fit that while not sacrificing sonically what makes them Metallica. And it's just, it's a concept that just sounds like it's doomed to fail. And I think Metallica did this because they are fans of Lou Reed. You know, I think it's evident that, you know, it wouldn't go without saying. Lou Reed did a lot of cool shit in his career. He did a lot of cool projects. He put a lot of cool things together musically. But this was just the weirdest thing I'd seen a band of Metallica's caliber try to tackle. It's a record that's understandably panned across the board because neither demographic knew what to do with this. You know, when I reviewed this record initially, while I was familiar with Lou Reed, I was definitely more on the Metallica side of the fence as far as like being more familiar and accustomed to their sounds. You know, I'd heard Lou's stuff before, you know, not a whole lot of Velvet Underground, but I had heard stuff from his solo work, and I had heard his collaborations he had done with other artists like the Gorillaz on Plastic Beach, but this just, it doesn't work. It's a record that even, I spun it for the first time in years for this review, and it left me just as baffled then as it does now. You know, the opening song, Brandenburg Gate, still sat in the back of my mind as like this surreal, out-of-body musical experience. And it still is, you know, because Lou and James's voices don't mesh. Lou doesn't fit over the instrumentation at all on this project. You know, The View, Dragon is a track that, by and large, it's like a Metallica song it's more like a Metallica song fronted by Lou Reed, and it's a weird concept, you know, and it's just, the whole record as a whole is a weird concept, both lyrically, with a sonic palette that doesn't match its abstract lyricism at all, or production that suits it. This is produced like a stadium metal record, but it's this avant-garde, poetic, abstract piece of music. It doesn't work at all. And it's a record that needs to stay in the past. No one this is not a place, especially for Metallica or for Lou Reed, that you really need to get to, because it's a record that sonically challenges the listener in ways that great records that try to challenge the listener don't do. You know, it's not a record that you spin for the challenge. It's a record that you avoid because it's like pairing orange juice and toothpaste. It just doesn't work, man. I still don't really like Load. I did a redacted of Load and Reload together, and I got to appreciate more of the songwriting on here than I did when I was younger. But even then, this record's concepts and sounds clash so heavily. This is the biggest mixed bag sonically, concept-wise, in Metallica's career. You know, the production isn't the worst. This is one of the most tepidly produced records in their career. It's not overblown. It's not as tightly produced as their, like, Golden Age stuff. And it's not as poorly produced as records that they would drop in the 2000s. But tracks like Until It Sleeps and King Nothing and Hero of the Day, like, that stretch alone embodies what's wrong with this record. Because you have Until It Sleeps, this, like, soft, alternative, sort of ballad-esque moment, bleeding into King Nothing, which is this, like, Enter Sandman ripoff, which bleeds into Hero of the Day, this tepid 90s alt-rock jam with, like, a post-grunge blues riff. This record it's poorly arranged. The sonic concepts as a whole don't land because they're doing way too much. They did this sort of scattershot approach to sonic concepts on this record that they tightened up a little bit on Reload. You know, Reload, for all of its, you know, mid-tempo, sort of sludgier, you know, leaning heaviness, doesn't feel as disorganized as Load does, and that's why Load sits below it in my ranking in its own little pocket. It's not as bad as LULU in that regard, and I feel like if you enjoy records like Reload or the Black Album, if you want to hear more 90s Metallica that's a little more experimental, listen to Load maybe, cherry pick the songs you like. I personally don't spin this record often or at all, but I can see the merit in some songs if you like certain things out of Metallica. You know, if you like the bluesier, leaning rock stuff, you would like tracks like 2x4 and Ain't My Bitch or The Outlaw Torn. If you like their more ballad-esque moments, you would like Until It Sleeps or Mama Said. If you want to hear more tracks like what they did on the Black Album, you can listen to King Nothing. Like, there's warrant for stuff here for stuff who likes it. I still hear King Nothing on the radio. I just personally don't like this record by and large because of what it's trying to do and failing at it pretty much across the board. This was a record I was pretty adamant to defend back in the day in my initial review. And I get it. I get why people don't like this record. It's pretty low in my ranking for pretty much the same reason. The production sucks so much. Like, the drums, worst produced drums I've heard in a popular metal, like, band by and large. Like, the drums sound like ass, the guitars sound way too overproduced, and the lack of solos leads to a lack of variety and flashiness that helps a band like Metallica across the board. They're a thrash band, and thrash is a genre indebted to not only its fast pace, but its incredible solo work. You know, that'd be like telling Kerry King he can't do fucking solos anymore. That dude's solos are one of the most iconic parts of his sound. But I like some of the songs on this record. I think Frantic is a decent opener. I like the title track. I think Some Kind of Monster is a decent, slower-paced, heavy moment that feels like it would be an offshoot from Reload's sound. I like Sweet Amber. I still like the drum breakdown on Sweet Amber for how shitty the drums are produced. And I like The Unnamed Feeling well enough. You know, I think the opening of a track like My World is pretty cool as well. They're trying to do cool guitar effects to supplement in the place of solos. They just don't do it enough across this record. Sure, some of the songs kind of suck, kind of underwhelming. Invisible Kid, not very good. All Within My Hands, kind of a boring closer. But there are things on this record that I enjoy. And similarly to Load, I can see somebody cherry-picking the songs they like, throwing them into a playlist, and rotating them in and out every so often. It's above Load, if only because it's more tonally focused, but it's more tonally focused because the band was stripping away a lot of stuff that made them more compelling sonically, and it led to a more boring listening experience, and the production sets it even further down because of that. If this album got a remaster, maybe they made it into a nice little EP, I could have seen this doing well in the 2000s when the band was in some heavy turmoil, but they didn't, and it wasn't, and this album sucks. Fortune, fame, mirror, bane. Like I said, Reload is a much more focused product than Load, and it leads to a more compelling listen as a whole. I kind of had a restraint of putting more songs from Reload in my redacted of Load and Reload because I like the songs on here more. You know, I like tracks like Low Man's Lyric, Where the Wall Things Are. I even think Carpe Diem Baby is a better version of some of the types of songs they were doing on Load. You know, I like the slow, lumbering Devil's Dance. I think The Unforgiven 2 is a decent extension of The Unforgiven's motifs. I like The Memory Remains. I think out of their alt-rock sounding jams, that is the best that they had done. Fuel, like I said in my redacted, an incredible opening track and one of the better, more compelling heavy songs from this era of their career. You know, there's a lot of decent stuff on here, and because they tightened it up a little bit, they got rid of some of the more experimental edge from Load, it made for a better record in my opinion. You know, I would be more inclined to recommend this to somebody than I would Load. Like, I feel like if you like the Black Album, listen to Reload before you listen to Load. You'll enjoy the experience that much more. You know, if you like general 90s radio rock, radio metal, listen to Reload. It's not a bad companion piece to what was going on in the scene. You know, still far cry in quality from the rest of the stuff. Well, not really. The next record, it's better song-wise, but its production kind of sets it a little closer. You know, the production on here is fine. It's just a little normal and boring by and large. You know, but the songs here, solid. Decent record. Their most okay record in their entire career. Now, I was all about this record when it first came out. I fucking ate this the fuck up because, in my mind, my favorite band was back. They got their old logo back, and they were making thrash metal again. And I still like this record by and large, but while St. Anger's production is horrible, this is just as bad for a completely different reason. This album is overcompressed to shit. The drums sound like borderline clipping levels of, like, obnoxious. And when you have songs that consistently tread the 7.5, 8 minute mark, it's annoying to hear snares that cacophonous paired with guitars that are ear-burstingly crunchy and loud, with James trying to compete with all of those sounds sonically. This record is just a mess production-wise. Like, while it'd be interesting to hear a remaster of St. Anger, Death Magnetic needs a remaster. Because I feel like the songs here are more compelling than anything I talked about thus far in this record, or in this review, as far as Metallica standards. You know, while it's a little derivative across the board, you know, The Day That Never Comes is straight up just one again. They have The Unforgiven 3 on here. Like, there's moments that are basically as derivative as Load. They just do them in enough of a different way to be compelling to listen to if you are a fan of Metallica's thrash metal material. You know, I still don't necessarily recommend this record because it's a record that definitely tests your abilities to hear something for this long. If it had a remaster, I wouldn't mind recommending it if you love their Injustice for All career, because it feels like something adjacent to that more than it does necessarily the Black Album. You know, while it has a ballad-esque moment like The Unforgiven 3, tracks like Suicide and Redemption, which is this longer, really extensive cut, or tracks like All Nightmare Long, or My Apocalypse, or Broken, Beaten, Scarred, feel more like offshoots from that era. They're a lot thrashier at their core. You know, there are still some mid-tempo stuff that feel like offshoots from the Black Album, but by and large, this definitely feels like them channeling their 80s material more, and I'm okay with that. That's one of the reasons why I do like this record, and I feel like it's one of the tightest records they had done in a long, long time. You know, this is, while having tracks that breach some really hefty lengths, they still keep it pretty tight at a nice 10 songs. You know, it has more going on with it instrumentally than anything they had done since the Black Album. And it's a very solid, it nets solid because the songs are pretty good and the production is utter ass. So it kind of evens out and creates a record that I feel like if you do enjoy their 80s material and you want to hear it done, again, in a little bit of a derivative fashion, listen to the Death Magnetic record. It's kind of a weird stepping stone, point of curiosity point. It's not a record that I feel like you need to cherry pick. If you do sit with it, you just might want to give yourself some time to sit through it, because I wouldn't recommend listening to it this loud for extensive periods of time, because it could possibly do damage to your ears. And their newest record, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Also, actually a really compelling release in their catalog. The production's not as shitty as it is on Death Magnetic, and the songwriting lends itself a lot better to like a bridge of their 80s and 90s material. After a record like LULU, I don't know if people knew what Metallica was going to do next, and they took a good 5 years to drop this record, so clearly they were taking their time with it. And for a double album, it's a little bloated, it's a little beefy. I could see myself redacting this at some point, maybe. But by and large, a lot of the tracks on here are far better than even tracks from Death Magnetic. You know, the opener Hardwired and the closer Spit Out the Bone are two incredibly thrash-driven tracks that feel faster than even tracks from Death Magnetic, which is supposed to be a love letter to their 80s career, and feel less derivative as also. Like, they're doing thrashy stuff again, but it doesn't sound like them completely trying to rip themselves off, which is also why it's above Death Magnetic. You know, it actually feels like them spreading their wings and trying to do more new things writing-wise. Tracks like Atlas Rise and Moth into the Flame and Confusion and Man Unkind feel like them, again, toying with sonic concepts that they did on the Black Album, but in a way that feels fresh for a band that's been around for this long. That's actually kind of interesting to see. You know, I like seeing Metallica forge new ground, and honestly, I'm glad that this album doesn't suck, because the Trujillo years have been really inconsistent and all over the board, because he came on during the Saint Anger sessions, but he wasn't on that record. You know, they made Death Magnetic a great throwback sound, but it was a little overcompressed. LULU sucked, and this record is actually really solid as a whole. Again, meanders a little bit. Tracks like Dream No More, and I think it's Now That We're Dead. There's a couple tracks on here that have that same kind of grooviness seen on Load that I feel like kind of taints the record sound. Because by the by, this record does a good job at just keeping true to what made Metallica great in the first place. But it's got some moments that, not necessarily all that great across the board. Still, a much more solid release, and I feel like if you like the Black Album, this is a decent next place to go after that record. Some of the songwriting lends itself to some stuff that they talked about on Injustice for All, as far as like, the troops and PTSD and stuff like that. So it's just a good companion record to those, and I'm glad that it exists, because it's great to see a band like Metallica not suck this late in their career. I feel like me initially covering covers albums in my discography reviews in this new format may seem a little weird to people. But I gotta keep covering them because they still kind of matter in that regard. You know, as long as there's studio albums, or at least they're covers done in a studio, it's a point for me to talk about it on here. And I feel like, honestly, covers records are kind of cool. You know, if a band can take a cover, or if they can take a track and either make it their own or pull it off incredibly well, it shows it's a testament to how talented the band really are. You know, I feel like, because some bands and some artists cannot pull off covers at all. But I feel like Metallica especially showcase that they actually are a really compelling covers band. And the first disc of this is all new covers that they recorded at the time. And the second disc is all old covers, all stuff that they'd done back in the day across the EPs. That's why I didn't cover the EPs of the covers in the EP section. But yeah, I really like this covers album, and it showcases that Metallica have a lot of interests outside of metal. It also shows that they really love Diamond Head, because there's a lot of Diamond Head worship on here. You know, but the Diamond Head covers are great. I like the non-metal covers, like their Nick Cave cover's pretty interesting, and their Lynyrd Skynyrd cover is kind of well done as well. I also enjoy the Merciful Fate. What the hell am I talking about? The medley of Merciful Fate tracks that's on here. I think each one flows together really well. I like the punk covers on here as well. I like their Misfits cover. I like their Queen cover. Queen's not a punk band, but I like their Stone Cold Crazy cover. They kind of turn it into a punk song in kind of their own Metallica way. And I like the Motorhead stuff. This is just all in all a really solid covers record, or covers compilation, as it were, because some of the tracks are old, some of them are new. But I think they're all done incredibly well. Some could do without, but I feel like, by the by, this is a really solid covers album. And I feel like if you enjoy Metallica as a whole, this is a good point of interest. This is a good point of curiosity. You know, if not just for their weird covers, like their Queen one, or their more softer ones, or to hear some of the darker stuff that they do, like the Small Hours, which is probably, honestly, my favorite cover on here. You know, I like the Last Caress stuff, and the Whiskey in the Jar cover, all that, all well enough. But stuff like the Small Hours, it's like really dark and lurching. Metallica melds into their soundscape incredibly well, and I feel like adds a whole new level of sinisterness that I kind of wish they would explore more. You know, it shows you that the band is capable of stuff that they just don't do on their records. And I like it. I like this a lot. I think it's really solid. So from this point on, I will just be ranking their Golden Age material. And Injustice for All is, at this point, partially because the production isn't great. Like, the initial production, while not the worst, has the most issues. It's the worst produced out of their Golden Age material. You know, famously, James and Lars were vindictive, oddly enough, for their new bassist, so they produced the bass almost non-existently on this project, and it's disgusting. Even in a song where they tribute Cliff Burton, it's still kind of pretty low in the mix, which is fucking weird. But the songs that are here are still certainly better than everything I've talked about thus far, original or covers. You know, they toy with more weird song structures and riff ideas, like on the Freightons of Sanity, or Eye of the Beholder, or on they keep it tight and thrashy, like on the opener, or Blackened, or Dyer's Eve. You know, they perfect the sort of soft, heavy track with one. They do a lot of stuff here that also has sort of these lyrical threads that tie throughout the whole thing of Injustice for All, you know, Injustice for None. You know, politics, war, all of it fucking sucking, and making a whole record about it. You know, I like this record. I think it is still very, very good. And I feel like it's a good stepping stone record in their career as a whole. You know, this in tandem with Hardwired are good stepping stone records. You know, if you like their early stuff, or you like their less heavy stuff. It's a good gateway into the heavy stuff. This is a good gateway into the softer stuff if you like the heavy stuff. Same with Hardwired. They're just two good companion records that came out in their career that both have their own concepts that they're going for. You know, I love tracks like Harvester Star. I love the riff work on that. I can't talk anymore, but I like a lot of the riff work on here, and I like that they're, again, experimenting sonically with some cool stuff. Yeah, this record's good. It's really good. I just wish that you could hear the bass. Kill 'Em All is a thrash classic. It's the most thrash, like old school thrash that Metallica ever gets. You know, they're still cutting their teeth on this record. Kirk didn't write a lot of the leads on here, or at least him and Dave both kind of were parts of the writing on this record, and it shows, because a lot of the riff work on here is more indebted to classic thrash in a very Dave Mustaine kind of way. But classic Metallica staples, like Whiplash, Seek and Destroy, Phantom Lord, Jump in the Fire, Hit the Lights, all classic thrash staples that Metallica has contributed. You know, this is just a pure, raw, cut the bullshit thrash record. It's got Anesthesia, an incredible bass solo from Cliff Burton, whose bass on here has such a cool sound. I really love the fuzz that track has going on for it. Yeah, this record kicks ass. If you want the leanest Metallica experience, maybe. It's not the leanest in that concept, but if you want the leanest as far as, like, it's all razor sharp metal, you can't go wrong with this. If you want, like, the most basic Metallica record sonically, listen to Kill 'Em All. You know, if you like their more ambitious stuff that they would drop after this, if you like the sort of what Metallica fundamentally came with the two following records and you want to hear them in their genesis, listen to Kill 'Em All. It's a good point to get to eventually if you like their heavy stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily say start here. It's a classic in its own regard, and you could see why it helped gain them a lot of attention, but I wouldn't say it's their best record by any stretch of the imagination. It's close, but not there. One of the highest selling records of all time, Metallica's Black Album, is a point where some of the softer pivots that may have been teased on tracks like One, from Injustice for All, like, fans hated them for making a music video, which is fucking stupid. That went full transition on the Black Album. While it still had its heavy moments, like the opener Enter Sandman or Sad But True, which pull the pace back a little bit, and they still had their faster, relatively thrashy moments, like Holier Than Thou, or Through the Never, or some of the more stomping riff work like on Of Wolf and Man. This record, by the by, keeps its pace a lot more broad as far as, like, doing a lot of different sonic experiments. Like, tracks like The Unforgiven, or Nothing Else Matters, which are straight up just ballad-esque moments. A track like Wherever I May Roam has this incredible dynamic evolution across it. It's one of my favorite Metallica songs. Hint, hint, it's actually my favorite Metallica song. The band were just firing off on, in my opinion, all of the right sonic cylinders and songwriting cylinders. I really like this record. Like, this was the record that I had listened to the most as a kid. You know, it's one that I've had like 5 different copies of across my lifetime. You know, it's a record that I would say I maybe get the most nostalgic for to listen to. Even if I don't think it's their best record, I really like a lot of what's here. I like the riff work on some of the tracks I mentioned. I like the choruses on tracks like the heaviness on Don't Tread on Me, and the riff that kind of follows that. You know, I love the thrashier nature on Through the Never. I like the ballad moments. I like the straight up nihilism on tracks like The God That Failed or My Friend of Misery. You know, I like what this record does dynamically for the band in evolving their sound in more of just a more straightforward hard rock sense. I think that they accomplished a lot of great stuff on here. I like that the bass is more prominent on here. And I think the band is just a very tight-knit group on here. You know, a lot of whatever growing pains they may have been going through on Injustice for All, they seemingly fleshed out on this project and made a much more holistic experience as a whole, and a more dynamic, engaging one with the listener. While I, again, like the thrashy moments on Injustice for All and some of the softer moments on there, and the outright razor-sharp 80s thrash that's on Kill 'Em All, I think that this record is a much more worthwhile experience for listeners, and I feel like it's the ultimate gateway record into Metallica, because it has a little bit of everything. It has some soft shit, it has some heavy shit, it's got incredible production, and it has really good songwriting, something that people do give credit to James for, but the writing on this is really very good. And yeah, I think this record kicks a lot of ass. There's a reason why it's one of the highest selling records of all time and one of the most successful records in its genre, because it did a lot of good things right. You know, I don't normally throw success out there like that as a benchmark, but when you look at the overall writing on this record, it makes sense. Is it their best in my opinion? No, but I still really enjoy it. Ride the Lightning would lay the groundwork for what I would consider the perfect pace for a Metallica record. And the one reason why it's not my number one, honestly, is Escape. I made a joke about it in my micro-redacted of it, but Escape is just such a forgettable track. If you forget it, the album's still perfect without it. You know, you have this soft opener that immediately propulses the listener into some heavy-ass riff work like Fight Fire with Fire. It adds an incredible title track in its second slot with Ride the Lightning with such a dark, sinister riff. You have the slower paced, epic, or gargantuan track like For Whom the Bell Tolls with this foreboding-ass bass line that has this great lead work to pair with it. You know, you have the dark, ballad-esque moment in Fade to Black. And then you have just a bunch of kick-ass thrash tracks to close the record out on, like Trapped Under Ice, Creeping Death, and the gargantuan instrumental Call of Cthulhu. This record is pretty much perfect. It is one of the benchmark thrash records, in my opinion. It's what my shirt is. You know, I'd recommend, if you like metal, listen to this and my number one together. They're great records that pair well because they're structured very similarly. This record just has one song I don't really give a shit about. Escape isn't a bad song, it's just a song that I forget exists half the time. You know, it's got its moments that are cool, but it's not nearly to the same caliber as what this record is delivering. But I love this record. I think it's one of the best metal records of all time. It's one of my favorite records of all time, especially in its genre. And I feel like Metallica broadened the scope of Kill 'Em All perfectly with this release. It still has that razor-sharp production that coded Kill 'Em All. The songwriting and the scope is just elevated tenfold, and that's what sets it above it and everything else that I put below it. Except, I was born for dying! I talked about this record a couple times in my time on the channel. It's one of my favorite albums. It's in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. I talked about it in the Metallica review, obviously. I love this record. There isn't a second wasted. And again, it takes the structure of a track or of an album like Ride the Lightning and perfects it. The scope, even bigger. The production on this record, fucking perfect. I love the way this record sounds. And there's a record that never needed a remaster, it's Master of Puppets. The guitars have the right amount of beefy crunch to them. The drums are thunderous as fuck. The bass is rumbling underneath everything. And James's vocals sit in the mix perfectly. This record is just incredible, you know. But again, it's got that opener that has some acoustics that then punch you in the face with some heaviness, like on Battery. It has an incredible title track right after that that is heavy, it's a lot thrashier, and it has much more dynamics going on than Ride the Lightning. It has this slow, stomping lurcher with a thing that should not be. It's got its haunting ballad with Welcome Home, and then it's just a slew of incredible thrash track after thrash track with an incredible instrumental in there that then closes off with Damage Incorporated. That would be the next benchmark that they would add into like what Metallica records are supposed to have. You know, because Just For All had Dyer's Eve. Their newest record has that as well. So did Death Magnetic. You know, this just perfected sort of what a Metallica, the checklist for a Metallica record, in my opinion. You know, I love Disposable Heroes. I love the riff on that. I love the subject matter. I love the chorus of that. I love Leper Messiah for the same reason, tackling war and religion in the same breath incredibly well. I think Orion is an incredible instrumental track that has some great solo work, some great bass tones in it. And I think Damage Incorporated is one of the best thrashy moments that they've made in this era, in this soundscape. You know, this record is perfect. It is absolutely perfect and straight up worth your time. Listen to this and ride the lightning, and then go throughout their career at your leisure if you like heavy stuff. If you don't, listen to Black and then get to this stuff. And if you like, just that's that. Either those two or Black, and you're set. Dive around the discography at your leisure. But this record, it's perfect. One of the best records ever made. I got nothing else, man. It's just flawless. And that's going to wrap up my Metallica Reformatted discography review. What did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know in those comments down below. If you did like it, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content like the Patreon cut of this, which dropped last year. Yeah. Along with access to all of my other Reformatted discography reviews that haven't dropped yet and won't drop probably for another year. Check it out. It's linked in the description, but I'm going to get out of here. I've been VowRack. You guys have good days, lots of situations, and I'll see you another day.